There is well-preserved evidence that UFOs and their alien occupants have been visiting humans for hundreds, even thousands of years. Here we look at two witnessed and reliable accounts of strange encounters in the 18th century. Alençon, France, 1790. The small township of Alençon was witness to a shocking UFO crash and the sight of a fleeing extraterrestrial at around 5 a.m. on June 12, 1790. Written documentation of the incident was discovered by Antonio Fenoglio, who was a teacher at the University of Bologna in Italy in 1967. It is now kept in the archives of the French Academy of Sciences in Paris. The account was a report by a police inspector named Liabeuf, who had been sent from Paris to thoroughly investigate what was described as a dangerous incident near the Alençon city gates. Several local farmers had watched in awe as a huge metal sphere had descended from the sky, seemingly surrounded by flames. At first, the men thought it to be a balloon that had caught fire, remembering a few years before this incident when the Montgolfier brothers had proudly performed the first ever balloon flight. But then their attention was drawn by the massive ball's rapid falling speed, its strange undulating motion, and the whistling sound coming from it. The large object crash-landed onto a hilltop, with the violent impact uprooting vegetation and throwing up soil which showered the hillside. The heat which emanated from the strange craft was so intense that soon the surrounding grass and trees caught fire. The farmers rushed up the hill carrying pails of water, and within a short time managed to contain the fire that threatened to spread throughout the area. A large crowd now encircled the crash scene, with some more daring souls stepping forward to touch the damaged hull of the object. This was quite warm, and by evening heat was still emanating from the otherworldly sphere. Liabeuf later described it as large enough to accommodate a carriage, and not affected by its dramatic fall. In the meantime, 2 mayors from nearby towns, a doctor, and 3 other government officials arrived, who, with the assembled group, comprised dozens of respected witnesses at the site. Finally, Liabeuf had arrived after travelling over 100 miles from Paris to investigate the crash, and he was given this astonishing account by members of the assembled crowd. They had all observed some kind of hatch sliding open in the lower half of the metallic sphere, whereupon a human-like figure emerged and surveyed the onlookers with apprehension. They described him as a person like us, but all related that the man was dressed strangely in what was seen as an outlandish, tight-fitting suit that clung to his body. The humanoid started to mumble something incomprehensible in an unknown language and gestured for the crowd to get away from him and his craft. A few people stepped back in fear, at which the being ran through the break in the circle and fled into the nearby woods. Their instinctive stepping aside saved the villagers' lives, because soon after the craft exploded with a strange muffled sound, creating a miniature mushroom-shaped cloud. Shards flew in all directions, with the fragments sizzling in the grass before turning to powder. Inspector Liabeuf organised a thorough search where the mysterious figure had taken refuge, but he seemed to have totally disappeared. Liabeuf's report included that the duration of the encounter was around 16 hours, and, if reliable, adds to the picture of UFOs with crews visiting Earth for a very long time. It's been theorised that the aircraft may have overheated or had other problems, requiring an emergency landing, and that when the pilot saw the crowd of onlookers, he may have decided to destroy his craft to avoid leaving important evidence of his existence to humans. Fortunately, there were no casualties, and the many witnesses helped Liabeuf to write a detailed report for the French Academy of Sciences. His suggestion that the man may have been a, quote, being from another world was dismissed as ludicrous by his Paris superiors. Now, apart from the message from Professor Fenoglio about the archival document, nothing more is known about the incident. Catania, Italy, 1753. Alberto Gordoni was regarded as a respected member of society, working as an artisan and gardener in the city of Catania in Sicily, Italy. In May 1753, he was walking in the yard of Ursino Castle when he suddenly and inexplicably, in plain sight, vanished into thin air. According to the report of the incident, also present and witness to his abrupt disappearance were his stunned wife and several others who included the Duke of Zanini. Those around him immediately began to search for him and dug up the area, but failed to find any trace of him or ditches or pits where he may have fallen. Others investigated all the nearby houses and other places, but Gordoni was not to be found anywhere. The way it looked was that at one moment this person existed, and then in a second he had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. The days of searching turned into weeks, then weeks into months, and months into years, but Alberto Gordoni remained missing. With no one ever seeing him again, the townspeople slowly forgot about him and the strange circumstances of his disappearance. Until, after 22 years, Gordoni suddenly appeared in the very place where he had vanished, in the Dominion's yard. He seemed to not have aged even a year during this time. When questioned about what happened to him and where he was for so long, he insisted that he had not disappeared anywhere at all, and for him those 22 years had not elapsed. He claimed to have been absent for no longer than 25 minutes. He was taken to a rest home for the feeble-minded, where 7 years later he confided in a doctor-cum-local priest named Father Mario. Gordoni still maintained that only a short time had elapsed between his disappearance and rematerialization. He told Father Mario that on that fateful day he had suddenly found himself in what seemed like a shimmering tunnel, where he entered and walked towards a vague white light. He saw no familiar objects there, but described weird mechanisms which were totally unknown and unrecognizable to him. He also observed something like a large canvas covered with stars and dots which seemed to pulsate independently. There he also encountered a tall, thin humanoid figure with long hair, possibly a female. The entity told him that he had fallen into a cleft or crack in time and space, and that it would be very difficult to deliver him back. While Gordoni begged for his return, the strange entity continued to tell him about holes opening up in the darkness, white drops, and thoughts that move with the speed of light. She also told him about souls without flesh and bodies without souls, and about flying cities where eternally young beings dwell. When he was finally returned to the place where he had disappeared, Gordoni believed that he had been absent for a maximum of half an hour. He was astonished to hear that 22 years had actually passed. Father Mario was apparently convinced that Gordoni was telling the truth, and later took him back to visit the place where he had disappeared and reappeared to see if anything would occur there again. When they reached the spot, Gordoni took one step and suddenly disappeared again, and this time for good. He was never seen again. As the disappearance happened right in front of Father Mario, he crossed himself and then ordered that the place be fenced, calling it the Devil's Trap. Paranormal researchers regard the case of Alberto Gordoni as representing one of the most compelling time-slip or portal-style abductions, a close encounter of the fourth kind, to be found in documented history. By identifying the location of the disappearance as, quote, the trap of the devil, Father Mario unwittingly described a localized anomaly that fits with modern theories about dimensional fissures or space-time warps. Gordoni's ultimate disappearance in 1782 is a haunting reminder that some close encounters do not end with a safe return, but can result in a permanent transition into the unknown. This Sicilian oral history continues to fascinate researchers, showing a link between 18th century religious interpretation and the 21st century UFO knowledge base.